to be with you to share some thoughts about the sustainability transitions that we will need to reach 1.5 degrees. I will share my screen. Okay, good. Let me dive straight into the heart of the matter. There is a clear context of unprecedented challenges that is captured in a number of global reports to which Europe contributes. And of course, we all know the global 1.5 degree report by the IPCC. But I would like to point out that this 1.5 degree target is intimately connected to the discussions taking place in the biodiversity agenda, to the discussions in the resource use agenda linked to the European circular economy objectives, but also has a close link to an agenda that is linked to human health and distributional issues. So while discussing a 1.5 degree agenda, we have to be recognizing the connections with other agendas. What we have in our own State and Outlook of the Environment report is a sort of analysis of the past trends on 3 main objectives of European policies. And we call this the piano of the European environment. And we look at a mixed color scheme of past trends where we see progress more on moving towards low carbon and resource efficiency, a more mixed picture on health and well-being, and a rather negative picture on natural capital. If we look at 2030, the outlook, the green almost disappears. And I think this is a sobering conclusion for a part of the planet that has the most ambitious, most integrated, most foundational policies on environment and climate of any other region on this planet. So the message here is clear. It's not that these policies are necessarily failing, but they may not be addressing the core issues of deep unsustainability. And so the message is that systemic change is needed, because even BAU, business as usual plus, which means doing better what we do today, is not an option. Yeah. In this context, I don't think I need to explain what the Green Deal is. Everybody knows this very well. I would just like to refer to the first sentence when you go to the Commission site and you look up the Green Deal. It talks about existential threats. So when we talk about 1.5 degree lifestyles and the trajectories embedded in the Green Deal, this is not some trivial stuff on the side, as we used to deal with these issues often in the past in politics and in economics. We are dealing with existential threats. They require high ambitions. And one of those ambitions that is, of course, hotly debated is the net zero emissions, and then the stepping stone in 2030 of minus 55% proposed target. Now, if we look at the curve between 1990 and today, and we look at the annual reductions in emissions, and we look at 1919 to 2050 and what will be needed on an annual basis, we see a factor 2.7 increase in annual emissions reductions that we will need. And that means speeding up and scaling up whatever solutions we have. And this is clearly impossible with current marginal efficiency gains as the paradigm. So the paradigm that we've been describing in our work is systemic transitions. And we need to recognize that those will have to be of deep character. That means not marginal efficiency gains as the going rate. There are no silver bullets to solve complex societal challenges. We need to recognize that we are deeply locked into social practices that will need to change, and we will have to deal with barriers to fundamental change. Now, let me go through a couple of key elements of paradigmatic change. And I know that some of these will be pushing the envelope a bit, but they all come from work that we've presented in the past. One silver bullet in the EU system and across the globe, I think, has been the idea of policy integration. You add some objectives of environment and climate to going policies, and that will lead to success. Well, we've seen in the emissions of the transport system, for example, that after 2 decades of environment and climate objectives in the transport system, the emissions have gone up. Yeah, and that doesn't mean there has been no effect of the policies, but overall they've been going up. So policy integration as an approach to really bending the trend has not led to desired outcomes. The same can be said for the food system. This is a map of nitrogen inputs to agricultural land and the adverse effects on water quality. Again, there is enough analysis out there that shows that the cap has been having an impact in its greening, but it has been seriously ineffective in really bending the trend in a number of core issues. Another silver bullet is the idea that fragmented, isolated solutions will lead to the bending the trends that we need. And the biofuels debate, I think, is an excellent element there. Mixing biofuels with other fuels in a 19th century technology called the combustion engine, which has a 25% efficiency on a good day, is probably not the breakthrough solution we will need in the transport and mobility system. That is the key message here. Another element is what we call medium-termism. And I know there is a lot said about short-termism, but medium-termism refers to 2030 and making the types of investments that seem sensible in the medium term, but don't necessarily make a lot of sense in the long term, 2050. So looking at the discussion about gas as a transition element in our energy system is a typical example here, where we could end up with a lot of stranded assets and billions invested in something that doesn't lead to long-term positive investments. Yeah. There's also the decoupling conundrum, which goes to the heart of the matter, where we see a slow decoupling, relative decoupling from global greenhouse gas emissions compared to global GDP, but no bending the curve. But when we look at material footprint, and that is connected to the 1.5 degree target, without bending that trend, we will never reach the 1.5 degree target. We don't see a decoupling at all. So this is important. Then, of course, the investment portfolio that will be needed, we see as a really high risk that we will keep investing, because that is where we are locked in and where quite a bit of the lobbying is going on, quite frankly, in what we call these marginal efficiency gains. And economists will know that they are increasingly costly, and engineers will tell you that they are tangentially marginal, and they lead to stranded assets. And that's what economists are now saying. Social scientists will say not only stranded assets, but probably also to stranded regions and stranded workers. So we need to stay away from that and really think of the investments needed in transitional change. And the sustainable finance discussion is critical here. Will it allow the red curve, or will it really push for the green curve? The reflections of this debate in the EU budget and in the stimulus fund are important. And decisions by the European Investment Bank, for example, to step away from carbon-based or fossil fuel investments really features in this red-green curve type of dynamic. So this is an essential element of the discussion. Also, the recognition that this systemic change will be disruptive, and I will not discuss the green curve, because that is the optimistic policy and investment curve, which we all know. We accelerate solutions to end up at a stronger and more stable, sustainable level. I think what we have failed to do enough is to reflect on what we should be phasing out, moving away from the optimization idea and phasing out, and whether this is specific tax systems or subsidy systems or technologies. This is, of course, where the real conflicts are and are going to be. And this is also where we will need to think of enabling conditions that will allow us to speed up and scale up solutions, including societal dimensions, which means that the societal change, which is all about vulnerability and just transition, needs to be taken seriously. And I think at this moment, it is probably the dimension that is most underdefined and underspecified in the European discussion. We have a rather poor knowledge base on this, and we are investing as an agency in strengthening it together with other agencies and partners. This is also linked to fundamental debates on distributional issues, which you cannot just solve with a Green Deal agenda, let alone with a 1.5 degree trajectory. It will require discussions about tax systems and about public investments and equality issues. And it's of course also linking Europe to the rest of the world in terms of responsibility and external footprint. Yeah, this brings me back to the Green Deal. And again, I will not go into the individual lines because the Commission colleagues know this by heart. But I think the essential message here is that, yes, it is the political, economic and investment priority for Europe, with a strong systemic transitions logic in principle embedded in it. But I think it will need to go to sectoral policies 3.0. The first one, 1.0, avoiding pollution. The second one was policy integration. The third one will be being part of systemic transitions. 2030 as a stepping stone to 2050 and avoiding the risk of medium-termism. Taking the social dimension seriously and really fundamentally, we are talking about changing society, not just about changing technology or the economy. A dominant orientation for innovation and digitalization, not an add-on, yeah, but the dominant paradigm there. And I think this will require a significantly different governance agenda. So recognizing that, I think, is absolutely important if we're going to put the Green Deal into action. My last slide, I think this will also need debate for fundamental, a space for fundamental debate, which of course is the goal of these workshops that you are doing now. And that will include the narratives part that Christophe already referred to. And we are launching a new series of reports and discussion elements. The first one being growth without economic growth. In other words, how do we interpret the vision of the 70 AP that is also embedded in the 80 AP, living well within the limits of the planet? What does that really mean, the living well under a different paradigm? Governing innovation for sustainability. The third one will be beyond fear, early lessons for sustainability from COVID-19. And we will have one, agriculture as care. And then ... because we think this is just the beginning of a serious space that we will need to discuss these narratives for change. Thanks for listening. I'm open for any remarks or discussions, Christophe. I hope this sets the scene and puts the bar high, because we will need to put the bar high if we're serious about the 1.5 degree planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans.